So you're talking about Ezekiel's wheel, right?
Mhm.
So the Ezekiel's wheel is today. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I know about it from a Christian perspective. So it's in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel's a prophet. Okay, so the Bible, this is the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. It is written in Hebrew. And this is the beginning of the Israelite community. Okay, so there's Genesis that describes the story of God kind of having a covenant with these men, all right, to create his people. Okay, and that's the book of Genesis. And there's some angel accounts in that too, I think, that are really interesting we could talk about. So we get to the history of the Jewish people and you get to the prophets. So you know about Egypt. So they're in Egypt and they have to leave, and Moses gets them out of Egypt. And so terrible things happen to them in Egypt, and so they need to leave. So they do. And then you get to a certain part of the Bible. It's like a history of the Old Testament is like a history, okay, of God's people. And so then they get to the prophets. Okay, so the prophets, Ezekiel is one of the prophets. And again, there's a government, there's Babylon, who's basically trying to control the Jewish people, and it's not good for them. So Ezekiel offers hope, and as a prophet of God. And what happens to him is that he has this, what some would call a vision, but it could very well, because this is what happens when people have encounters today, say with UAP or what they consider to be angels or something like that. They can't tell if, and you see this also with Paul in the New Testament, when he sees Jesus, he says, I don't know if it was like a dream or if it was real. I cannot tell. So it's a very confusing thing that happens to Ezekiel, but it's called Ezekiel's vision, okay? But I'm sure he thought it was real, and it seems real, okay? So he has a waking dream, maybe, or a vision that appears real. And it's of these beings that look odd. They have wings, and they also have wheels associated with them, okay? And this is in chapter 1, so it's at the very beginning. And he has this, and what it does is it gives him the realization that God's people will continue, even though they're being pretty much decimated by the Babylonians. Okay, so the Babylonians are putting them in exile, and they're kind of breaking them up. And he has this vision of these beings who impart this knowledge to him. Now, that is part of a mystical tradition within Judaism that I've talked, when you're in my field, you get to have friends who have PhDs in areas that you don't. Mm-hmm. So that's basically one of the best things about what I do, in my opinion. I like it. I get to go talk to friends who are expert at New Testament and say, is this tradition in the New Testament? And yes, apparently it is. Now, these people won't say this publicly, so I'm going to say it. But it's called this, Shawn. Ezekiel saw what's most likely a seraphim. A seraphim.
A seraphim.
Yeah, it's a seraph. So seraphim is like the plural of seraph. It's an angel. It's a type of angel. And you've seen it before, this. It's like the eye with the wings around it, okay? And sometimes it's shown with wheels. And so Ezekiel interpreted this, and other Jewish people interpreted this to be the throne of God, right? The very throne of God. Like these were the beings at the throne of God.